Let me show you today how to paint a realistic acrylic portrait of a baby. This is Matt Philleo, and today I'd like to show you here from my studio article I did. We'll call this a video article as I read it to you out loud here on YouTube and being recorded also to Steam it. I'm going to show you step by step how I painted a realistic acrylic portrait of a baby, 16 by 20 acrylic on canvas, and show you every step that I took in creating this so that you can do the same and that this would be your best year for creating a portrait. In this particular painting, the client wanted a painting that was an oval vignette style to match some existing portraits in her home. Here is the photo she supplied me with to paint from. Now, she wanted me to make his hair combed off to the side, unlike what you see in the photo, which, that's an easy enough change to make. Here's the reference photo. Just a beautiful, beautiful baby, smiling with the nice pink cheeks, and just a perfect kind of baby that you'd love to do a portrait of. Now let's go through the process and how I painted this portrait. If you're an artist, I hope this encourages you to try a portrait. And if you've done portraits before, I pray that in 2018 you'd be able to create your best portrait ever. But if you're not an artist, I hope this process will be at least interesting for you to see how a portrait slowly emerges from the canvas. All right, here we go. Step one, the sketch. So the sketch is the most important part of any portrait painting, whether in acrylic, oil, or watercolor. The sketch is the foundation. Just like any house builder won't build without a blueprint, unless they want a lopsided house, an artist shouldn't plan to do a lifelike portrait without an accurate sketch. Some artists can work without one, starting very loosely, just by blocking in colors and value roughly, and work their way into detail. But it takes a lot of experience to pull that off. Many of those artists who can do that really cut their teeth in learning how to draw with hours of practice. So for most artists, I just recommend starting your painting with a sketch. You can use a grid or a projector to help if you haven't done a lot of freehand drawing. And I've found that that colored pencil is an amazing way to sketch on canvas. It works so much better than graphite pencil. Why? Well, first of all, you can choose a sepia or an earth tone that really matches your skin tones within the portrait. And then secondly, it's surprisingly easy to erase on a properly prepared canvas. You just go over your canvas with a mixture of 50% gesso, 50% matte medium, and let it dry, and then you're set. And after that, you should be able to sketch and erase like a dream. By the way, I use Prismacolor dark brown or terracotta for sketching. So you can see that right here. This terracotta is just an amazing color for duplicating skin tones. Make sure you keep it sharp. Use a nice pencil sharpener. But in the sketch, I make sure I've not only captured the shapes and the lines of the baby's face accurately, but I also want to get the shading in. Now, the shading is what makes the difference on a portrait. So if you can get it in there during the sketch stage, it's a lot less work trying to figure out where to go in the painting after that. Basically, all you're doing is just enhancing what you've put down in pencil. All right, so now step two, sealing in your sketch. So after you're confident that the sketch is looking accurate, the next step is to seal it in. And what I mean by that is this. You'll take some matte medium, and that's the clear acrylic, without the pigment that dries to a flat finish. And you can get this at your local art store like Michael's or Hobby Lobby. And then you brush it on the sketch. Just using a large 1-inch or 1.5-inch brush, and that'll create a barrier between your sketch and the painting. Now, the last thing you want to have happen in your sketch is that it gets all messed up as you apply the brush in the painting process, and that is not fun. So what I did is I put the medium in a little condiment container. A little condiment container, just like what you'd put your ketchup in, you know, at a fast food restaurant. And by the way, you can buy these really inexpensively at Walmart, or probably any store like that, but for sure at Walmart in the food storage section. And so you'll get that, and you know, I just put medium in just like this, just squirt it in, you know, just enough to cover over, and then you'll you know, dip it in the brush in there and just start covering over your sketch. So the thing is you need to be careful not to smear your sketch work. And again, if that happens, well, painting's not ruined, but it's just, you have to overcome that. And why would you want to do that if you didn't have to? But actually, you can make this process work for you. I found that the medium started mixing in with the colored pencil pigment, you know, when I applied it, and it kind of turned it into a glaze, or, you know, a faint paint layer. So I brushed it on in the direction of the contours of the face, and it enriched the color and the contrast of the sketch. Just amazing. So you can see the difference right here between the sketch, the before and then after it was sealed in. So you notice, you know, here it's kind of faint, and, you know, it's kind of crisp, but after I put that medium on, it saturated the color and kind of brought out the sepia tone, you know, in the colored pencil, and enhanced it. So it already began the painting process before I got to the painting process. And, you know, if it makes for less work in the painting stage, why not try something new? All right, so step 3, blocking in the initial color and value. Okay, so now in this stage, it's important to cut yourself a little slack, because when you start establishing the colors and the value, your sketch is getting all covered up, or at least getting covered up a little, and you lose some of the overall cohesion of the values that you drew. So what I mean by that is, you know, if you're kind of in a in-between stage, and, you know, like with any in-between stage in life, it can look a little awkward, you know. So if you have children, think of how they looked when they first started to walk, right? They could crawl like an expert, but once they started to walk, you know, they waddled, they wobbled, they fell, maybe even cried, but, you know, they always got back up again. So same thing here, you know, in this stage, as you put down a few layers, things may look a little messed up, but no worries, you know, just keep going, and look at your reference photo. Keep in mind, you know, you have a blueprint to follow. So sooner or later, your painting is going to look very similar to what you see in the reference photo. So I used raw umber dark for the shadows, raw sienna, alizarin crimson for the lighter areas. And the crimson, that really works well for establishing the pinkish tones in the baby's cheeks and lips. Everything is very faint. And then I use that matte medium, just love this stuff, and I use that to thin out the paint, to glaze it on with very minute layers. So again, you know, you're just taking that brush, and you're just very, very faintly, you mix all your colors, you know, either in the container or on your palette, and just lightly apply that layer after layer. And you can easily adjust the direction of your painting on the fly, which is really what's amazing about the technique. And you can build up a lot of shading, even though acrylic dries, you know, very fast, as we all know. Finally, because the layers are translucent, the light shines through the surface, and gives you a richness and a depth that a lot of people, really often mistake your paintings for oils when you paint like this. Okay, so step 4, bringing out the dark values. So at this step, I wanted to make sure the baby's eyes would be dark enough. I also wanted to darken certain spots of the painting so it more closely matched the values of the reference photo. Areas like the hair under the ears, the shadow to the left of his neck, and then the crevices in the mouth on either side of the teeth. Now, when you get the darkest values established, then you know what you're up against. Really, it makes it easier to know how dark to take the rest of the painting, because with values and colors, everything's relative. So once you darken a certain area, it'll really look out of place until you darken everything else accordingly. Now, in addition to this, I also added more color to the face and the hair, and I used a mixture, of raw sienna and alizarin crimson. But then for the hair, I use mostly raw sienna. Now, the trick with blonde hair is not to make it look too yellowish. You see, many beginning portrait painters tend to do that. It's easy to do because we're so conditioned to think of blonde hair as yellow. From cartoons we've seen. Also the way we've been taught to use yellow crayons, in coloring books and that kind of thing. So, don't get confused by that, because blonde hair actually is a pale golden brown. And there's also other nuances of color in it too, depending on the lighting, and even, if there's colored objects that are around that could reflect onto it, that also can change the look of the hair. All right, now step 5. We're going to talk about blending the skin tones and adding nuances. Just want to show the face to you so you can see the progression here. It's coming along. Okay, so now the portrait is starting to look realistic. There's still a lot of work to do. 50% of your time is going to be spent, getting the portrait to a stage where it looks just passable. Hate to break it to you, but the other half is spent on smoothing things out and refining the details. So, if you want your portrait painting to go to the next level and have a portrait that you can really be proud to show others, you just can't miss the final steps. It takes some patience, but it's worth it. So in this step, I added the reflections in the baby's eyes. You can see that there. It's not finished yet, but I started them. I added 2 light blue dots in the correct places within the pupil. That way, in the next step, I can add a smaller white dot in the middle of them, and then it'll look like there's truly light reflecting off of them. So it's how you build the nuances, is get that darker color in first, and then the lighter color right in the center. Now for the mouth, it's important to make sure that the coloring of the lips is correct, of course, and that the teeth aren't too white. Because our symbolic association of teeth being white, we often paint them with like just pure bright white, but in actuality, most people's teeth are not even white at all. They're kind of an off-white, even with a bright light shining on them. And the shadows, from the mouth itself, goes over the teeth a little bit, and then that causes them to appear even darker. So with that, what I did was I mixed raw umber dark and a little bit of titanium white. So let's see, raw umber dark. Just got my tube here. Titanium white, and then I went over the teeth with that. Now I developed some shadows just around the edges with a few more layers, so they didn't look paper flat. You can see that there. Just soften that up a little bit. getting some of the shadows within. I pay attention to the shadows on the corners of the mouth, and that's where it really starts to create the depth. Teeth should be lighter towards the center, the front teeth, because that's where the light is hitting them. So you want this area to be brighter, and of course, on the sides it can be a little bit darker. Now for the background, all along I've been adding several layers of ultramarine blue with a little raw umber dark mixed in, and just a touch of alizarin crimson, just enough so it's not kind of a greenish color, but it balances it out. And what this does is it creates that oval vignette look, that the client requested, but also with some differentiation between the foreground and the background. So with this, the warmer colors of the face will come forward in space against the cooler tones of the background. And that's exactly what we want to do, is create depth. You can see that right there, getting a little differentiation between the oval, and then the face coming forward in space. All right, so now step 6, smoothing out the roughness. So here you can see it's really starting to look more realistic, but it's not there yet. There's still some nuances that have to happen first. One of the downsides of the glazing technique is that it creates a lot of unwanted texture. So and that really is because the semi-transparent glazes pool up in the pits of the canvas, the surface, and creates an uneven look, even when you view it closely. So to compensate for that, we have to smooth it out. I use the same colors I had throughout the painting, and just added a little titanium white to make the layers more opaque. And you only want to use enough to just partially cover over the previous layers. You still want all the other layer work to shine through, but it's something you have to play with to get the correct amount. And also another thing is to keep in mind that when you do add white to the layers, you're going to cool them down color-wise, and so you have to add some warmer colors to compensate. Now, unless you're trying to cool the skin tones down on purpose, then the white could help you with that. But otherwise, you want to make sure you're adding the warmer colors. Now, I found that my skin tones overall were just a bit too warm, so I used the white again, and I mixed it in with the other colors, and still thinned out, with a glaze. So it's not going to be opaque. It's going to be thinned down using your matte medium. And you can only do that so much on top of the darker values, otherwise you'll muddy up the color. So basically, you want to apply this to the lighter and mid-tone areas. You don't want to apply that white on top of a dark shadow. Otherwise, it's going to end up looking kind of grayish. So you got to be careful there. With those areas, you're going to want to use raw sienna, which is very opaque, and also mix a little bit of alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue to offset the yellow. Okay, step 7, the final details and finishing it up. And here we have the final portrait. I really like how this one turned out, and it took 25 hours or so to do, but I think it was worth all those glazes just to really get the softness of the skin and all the different nuances within his skin tone and the shadows. So anyway, I really like this portrait. I haven't done a lot of baby portraits, and it was fun to be able to do one here. Now, at this step, you can feel pretty good about the painting. It looks just about done, and because you've layered everything, and when I'm talking about, I guess the step would actually be right here, because in this image I'm showing you the final product. So you kind of have to draw a bridge between this and then this right here. But anyway, looks just about done because you've layered everything. You don't have any white space left in the canvas, which would indicate that the painting is not done. And that's a good thing. But it's good just to take it a little bit further. So I went over everything, enhancing the contrast, Putting in some final details within the eyelashes, the teeth, the shiny reflection on the lower lip, you know, just that little area that catches the light, just to make it look moist, you know, because babies' mouths usually are very moist. They're always drooling, and if you've had kids, you know that full well. The hair needed a little more realism, so I added some highlights with raw sienna, a little Indian yellow on there, just to bring out that kind of shininess on the hair. And again, if you remember from the top, baby's hair is kind of going in different directions, and the client wanted me to make it all going in one direction. So that was a little change that I had to make there, but I think it turned out pretty well. So anyway, I also darkened the background with a few more layers to heighten the contrast, and I used some glazes of titanium white to smooth out the edges of the vignette oval and give it a cloudy look. You know, so we kind of smoothed out these areas here using titanium white, and going over the edge of my glazes, that really helped. And again, not pure titanium white, but again mixed with the matte medium just to thin that out, and that really helps you to fade it in. Now, although I could continue working on the painting for hours more, there is a certain, you know, there's a point where the law of diminishing returns comes into play, and you know, at a certain point, you're just pushing paint. You're not really making a significant difference in the overall impact of the painting. In fact, you're even starting to undo the good things that you've accomplished. So that's when you know it's time to call it done. So I did. So finally, I signed it, and that is the most fun step of all. When you sign your painting. Now, there is actually a trick to signing your painting, I think. You know, I think you could, it's not like you can really mess up a painting, but, you know, potentially you could actually make a painting look worse by having an out-of-place signature. So I recommend just making your signature legible, but not too prominent, because that overshadows your work. It's also good to use a color that's similar to what's already in the painting so it matches. And so in this case, I use you know, kind of a darker color of the actual background, ultramarine blue, raw umber dark, a little white to kind of thicken it up. And there's my signature. Painted in 2017. Anyway, after the painting was finished, then I emailed an image for the client to review and for their approval. And they liked it, so that was good. They liked it, I got paid, so boom, boom, that's a win-win. And when you're happy, you know, with what you've painted, your client's happy, then your job's done. So I say time to go out to dinner and celebrate. Always a good thing to do. I think anytime you have a win and you create something worthwhile, hey, go out and celebrate. You know, it kind of motivates you to want to do it again, you know. So any motivation we can give ourselves, I think, is a worthwhile thing. Anyway, as an extra bonus, here is a time-lapse video, and I have it on YouTube, showing the whole progression of the portrait as I painted it. This video is about 5 minutes long, shows everything step by step. Really cool. So if you go to my original post on steamit.com with this link here showing on the top, original portrait painting of a baby, step-by-step process, you can see this whole article. Go through it at your own pace. And also you can play this video too. The link is right in the article. So hope you enjoyed this video article today. If you like this post here on Steamit, sure appreciate your upvote and a re-steam if you'd like to do that. And you can get to see more of my art at realisticacrylic.com, where I teach in-depth courses on how to paint a realistic acrylic portrait painting that you'll be proud to show others step by step. So have a blessed day, and I'll talk to you soon.